Economic forecasts are like a double edged sword. They attempt to unveil the future of financial markets and economies. But do these predictions hold any truth? Or are they just speculative endeavors? Today, Howard Marks and Peter Lynch will explain the stupidity of economic predictions.
Do you remember when oil went from 4 to 40? Remember that period? Oil went from 4 to 40, and the experts said it was going to go to 100, and all the countries of the world were going to go bankrupt. And then the big banks are going to go bankrupt, and we're going to have a Great Depression, and the stock market's going to go down, and you're going to wind up selling pencils and apples. Well, I remember when oil went from 4 to 40, and the experts said it was going to go to 100. Within 2 years, oil was at 14. The experts, now much higher paid at this point, are saying it's going to go to 4, and we're going to have a depression. And people believed it again. I remember when the money supply was growing too fast, they said we're going to have a depression. Then it was going too slow, we're going to have a depression. Remember the LDC debt? All the banks, our banks are very smart. They lend all their net worth to Zimbabwe and Botswana and Botswana and all these countries, Chile, a lot of countries they can't pronounce. This is Chase Manhattan and Chemical and Manufacturers Hanover. These countries weren't doing so well. Then they were called undeveloped countries or less developed countries. Now you have to call them emerging countries. It's not politically correct to call anybody an undeveloped country. It's like I just found out the other day the term for somebody that's overweight is laterally challenged. You have to say something laterally challenged. But these were LDC debt. They were all going to go bankrupt, and we're going to have a depression. Then the Mideast was going on in the world. Remember that one? The Mideast was going on in the world. They weren't going to buy our bonds, and the market crashed, and we're going to have a depression. Then Japan was going on in the world. Remember that one? Japan was going to have all the assets, and they weren't going to buy our bonds, and we're going to have a depression. Within 3 years, the Nikkei Dow had gone from 40,000 to 16,000. The banking system was in trouble, and people said Japan was going to collapse, and we're going to have a depression. I mean, people had, on their prayer list at the end of the day, they had eliminated crippled children and Mother Teresa. They're praying for Japan. I mean, it's a country with a 15% savings rate. It's something bizarre. Commercial real estate, global warming. And I think as the older you get, the more nervous you get about these things. I think it's very valuable. I think while younger people are better investors, is they're not worried. They haven't heard about all these crises. And they're with children. I think if you don't have any kids, you got to rent some kids for the weekend. Get a 7-year-old and ask him if he knows about the money supply, how fast it's growing.
Peter Lynch's story about predicting oil prices or the economy has an important lesson. Experts' guesses about what will happen in the market aren't always right. The story shows that markets can be really unpredictable and that experts often make big claims that don't come true. He talked about how oil prices go up and down a lot, and this pattern of experts making bold predictions and investors believing them happens over and over again. He gave examples like when experts said there would be big problems with debt in Latin America, didn't turn out as bad as they said. He mentions how people thought a crisis in the Middle East would lead to a financial disaster, even though things really didn't turn out that way. Lynch also talked about Japan's economy and how experts had different opinions that changed very quickly. The main idea here is that expert predictions can be really wrong, because they don't always consider the very minuscule and complex things that are in the world of investing and economics.
Forecasters have no choice but to base their judgments on models, be they complex or informal, mathematical or intuitive. Models, by definition, consist of assumptions. If A happens, then B will happen. In other words, relationships and responses. But for us to willingly employ a model's output, we have to believe the model is reliable. When I think about modeling an economy, my first reaction is to think about how incredibly complicated it is. The U.S., for example, has a population of around 330 million. All but the very youngest and perhaps the very oldest are participants in the economy. Thus, there are hundreds of millions of consumers, plus millions of workers, producers, and intermediaries. Many people fall into more than one category. How can a model of an economy be comprehensive enough to deal with things that haven't been seen before, or haven't been seen in modern times, meaning under comparable circumstances? This is yet another example of why a model simply can't replicate something as complex as an economy. Of course, a prime example of this is the COVID-19 pandemic. It caused much of the world's economy to be shut down, turned consumer behavior on its head, and inspired massive government largesse. What aspect of a pre-existing model would have enabled it to anticipate the pandemic's impact?
Marx underscores the inherent limitation of economic models. Models are constrained by historical data and may falter when faced with unprecedented events like the COVID 19 pandemic. The pandemic's unforeseen nature reveals the inadequacy of models that are designed to work with existing frameworks and may struggle to account for drastic disruptions. 100 years ago, we had pandemics, but they didn't have the same technological innovations that we have today. They didn't have iPhones. They didn't have billions of dollars invested into healthcare. The economy operates as a complex ecosystem that changes every day, influenced by countless variables and behaviors. Attempting to predict the intricate interactions within the system is a formidable challenge.